And joining me now is Amber Phillips. She's a reporter for the Washington Post. Amber, the White House said that this bipartisan meeting was highly productive. What would you say is behind the president's latest appeal here?
Yeah, a couple things. First, let me say, I don't think there's any long-term strategy. We haven't seen any evidence that the president has one of those for anything, much less reaching out to Democrats. But I think there's a short-term strategy from President Trump in that it's quite simple. He liked the feedback he got from cutting a debt ceiling deal with Democrats last week. He got a lot of headlines and press coverage with the word deal in it, which is useful for a guy who's written the art of the deal. I think he's also genuinely frustrated with Republicans for not passing Obamacare repeal after spending 7 years campaigning on it. We saw that in a couple tweets the president sent last week where he said basically, sorry, Republicans, you tried. Like, I'm frustrated by this. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amber.
I was going to point out one more thing, and it's that notice the senators who came to dinner with him last night, they're red state Democrats who are up for re-election next year in states that the president won by a lot. I think the president recognizes how powerful it is to at least have an open line of communication with these senators.
I was just going to ask you about that. The fact of the people that he invited around the dinner table yesterday was really telling. Yeah. When you talk about the specifics, so pivoting to tax reform and his tax plan, we don't have a lot of details. What's the White House saying about that?
Yeah, the White House is essentially trying to backroom negotiate with House Republicans and Senate Republicans on this, and I think that's important to note. And despite all the, high-profile bipartisan dinners and lunches and meetings, a lot of negotiations are happening in the back room with Republicans and Trump aides. And what we're hearing is that they don't have a plan yet. They largely agree that they want to cut the corporate tax rate. They want to give businesses a little more extra cushion on what they can deduct in their taxes, but they're not sure by how much, and they're not sure how to pay for it. And that right there appears to be a red line that Democrats are drawing on whether they'll cooperate with tax reform, because Democrats have a campaign that says not one penny, which means not one penny of cuts to the wealthy and to corporations. We want to see it for the middle class, and there's a real big chasm there that I don't know if these bipartisan dinners can cross.
And, this fact that there's such a big divide between what the Democrats want and what the Republicans want, and then there's a divide within the Republican Party. I mean, How do you find any unity here, Amber, between all these varying factions?
Yeah, tax experts have been saying since the beginning of the year, you think healthcare reform is hard, just wait till we get to taxes. Right. And I'll quote, one of the deans of tax reform in the Senate, Senator Orrin Hatch from Utah. He chairs the Finance Committee, which will play a big role in this. He said tax cuts, anytime you want to cut something or you want to increase someone's taxes, there's a constituency attached to that. There's bottom line, whose income, maybe their ability to buy a new car, pay for childcare, depends on that. It's really, really personal, almost as much, if not more, than healthcare. And so it's going to be very tough to get everyone on the same page.
And, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin has mentioned using the process of reconciliation to pass tax reform. Can you break that down for us? What does that mean, and where will that likely take us?
Yeah, that means that Republicans are fully expecting to not have any votes from Democrats. It's basically a budget tool that they can use where they pass the 2018 budget framework, and then they can negotiate any bill they want and vote on it as long as it relates to the federal budget. And they can do it without, they will, in the Senate, it'll prevent Democrats from filibustering it, because they can say, oh, this deals with the budget, and so there's this tool that allows us to pass tax reform as long as it deals with the federal budget, and you can't filibuster it. The suggestion from the White House is that that's exactly what Republicans are going to have to do, given the divides between Democrats and Republicans on tax reform. That's a problem, because it's not clear that there's even a majority of Republicans, especially in the Senate, where they only have a couple votes majority over Democrats to pass something.
And what does it mean, the fact that Mnuchin wants this done by the end of the year? The budget hasn't even been put in place. What are folks in Washington saying about that? Is this really likely?
No, it's not likely. Listen, Republicans and House Speaker Paul Ryan laid it out today. They want to have a plan put together by the end of this month, and then they're going to start writing bills that go through committees, that get voted on and find their way, filtering up to the top of committees, and then get voted on the House, and then get voted on the Senate. This isn't going to happen quickly the way Obamacare did, or excuse me, an Obamacare repeal earlier this spring, where lawmakers basically wrote it behind closed doors, put it on the floor, and had a vote on it. And I think the White House, and we sense this from the president and his tweets as well, has an urgency. They want tax reform on their desks now because next year, 2018, next year's an election year, and they will find themselves having gone an entire year in control of Washington without a major legislative accomplishment to champion. That's a big problem, and that's why you sense Mnuchin and the president getting really antsy about tax reform.
Yeah, I want to turn also to health care while we have you. Bernie Sanders unofficially unveiling this Medicare for All bill today. Can you tell us about it? What do we know? Where is this headed?
Sure. We know that this is becoming a political tool for a lot of Democrats more than the policy behind it. This is basically very consistent with what Senator Sanders campaigned on for president, and frankly what he's been campaigning on for senator pretty much the entire time he's been in office. It would essentially have the government pay for most, if not all of our health care needs. It would turn us into a more European kind of single-payer system. What's really interesting about this bill, and Senator Sanders broaching it, is that it's not suddenly something the far left is championing. It's something that a lot of potential 2020 Democratic candidates are also signing on to. Major senators, from Senator Warren to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand to Senator Al Franken, all people who could potentially challenge President Trump in 2020, have signed on to this bill. They've rushed on to sign on to it. That's not a coincidence. It's them reading the tea leaves and sensing that a health care for all discussion is going to be a big litmus test for Democrats in 2020, at least in the primary.
So do you think this entire bill is sort of dead on arrival? Will it go anywhere and have any traction?
Oh, dead on arrival completely. I mean, Republicans control the Senate. They are, they've moved on from healthcare, and even if they were on healthcare, the last thing they would want to do is pick up a Bernie Sanders bill that essentially puts more government involvement in healthcare. Got it.
All right, Amber. And we know the president's also likely headed to Florida this week. What do we know about that visit?
Yeah, we know that the president is going to try to do a repeat of what he did in Texas, which is talk to hurricane victims, first responders, try to give the sense that he did after Hurricane Harvey, that his administration is focused on recovery efforts, disaster aid. He'll be able to champion a $15 billion aid package that Congress sent to his desk last week. And it's all part of what the president has spent the past 2 weeks on, quite frankly, which is learning how to present himself as a leader who is keenly focused on Americans who are suffering from a disaster.
The fact that the president has sort of created this deal with Democrats last week, he's getting out there talking to storm victims. Is there some concern within the Democratic Party that if you get too close to the president and start siding with him, you might isolate some of these more left-leaning folks within the party who aren't big fans of the president?
Yeah, absolutely. There is nothing that motivates the Democratic base like talking about how bad Trump is. But that's a problem for Democrats more broadly when you come up 30,000 feet, in that might motivate the Democratic base, but it sure didn't help them win big in November. In fact, it cost them a couple seats, you could argue. And so Democrats are struggling with how to balance that tension of what might be smart policy more broadly, right? Like, what can they go campaign on next year to try to take back the House in some of these red states? Well, a deal with President Trump on a number of things would be a great thing for them to campaign on. But they still need their base to be excited, and President Trump is absolutely toxic with their base. And so they're having a hard time trying to balance that, and I think we're watching them move through that as we speak right now.
Amber Phillips, thank you for joining us, Amber.
Thank you.